Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the February 7th, 2023 Education Instruction Subcommittee. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Representative Chisholm. Here. Representative Glenn. Here. Representative Hakeem. Here. Representative Hicks. Here. Representative Johnson. Here. Representative Leatherwood. Here. Representative McCalman. Here. Representative Moody. Here. Representative Reagan. Here. Representative Raper. Representative Warner. Here. Representative White. Here. Chairman Sapiki.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, members. Thank you for being here, everybody. We are going to get right into it because we have a full calendar of presenters today, and I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak. If by chance you are on the end of the speaking list, we will roll you till next week because right now we don't have any thinking of football there, any bills calendared for next week right now. Members, right now I think we only have 3 bills assigned to our committee. There might be more coming. But my goal will be is to tell the members to put their bills on notice as quickly as possible so we can get this committee closed so that we can focus on Chairman Moody's full committee and maybe continue this dialogue with people coming in to present to us. I know the other side with Chairman White, they have a little bit more work to do. Right, Chairman White? Appears that way. And so they may be tied up in this where we could handle a lot of these discussions for them. With that being said, members, I'm going to give the gavel to Chairman Moody. I want to take care of the lone bill on our calendar today. It is one I'm presenting. And then I'll come back when we're done.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Members, today on our calendar we have House Bill 0029 by Chairman Sapiki. And a motion and a second. Chairman, you may proceed.
Thank you, members. This is a bill that came to me from THEC, and what it does is very simple. I got to give credit to Flora Tidings from TBR last week, and Chairman White's committee talked about the importance of keeping students engaged who need remedial coursework. Very, very powerful thing she made about how it's so important. What this bill does is it gives our four-year colleges, public four-year colleges and universities, the ability to offer co-requisite remedial coursework to those kids who want to go to school at those four-year colleges. For instance, a long time ago when I attended the University of Wisconsin, if you had to take a remedial course, they would offer you Math 101 and then assign a lab to you. And the lab was a tutor to help you get caught up to speed so I could still attend the University of Wisconsin and continue to work towards my degree instead of under what current Tennessee law says is they have to go to a community college first. So all this bill does is it creates the option, doesn't require, it's not mandated, it just gives our four-year public institutions the ability that if they want to offer co-requisite remedial coursework to students that need it, they can offer it to them. Madam Chairman, that's what the bill does. I'll answer questions.
Thank you for that explanation. And members, does anyone have any questions for the sponsor? Yes, Representative Leatherwood. Littleton, I'm sorry, Leatherwood.
A lot of the same letters. That's fine.
Not much difference.
I answered a wide variety of things over the decades. So is TBR supportive of this?
TBR, from what I know, is neutral on it. They understand the need to make sure our kids are engaged and stay engaged. When you win 12 and 13 games at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, a lot of kids want to go to University of Tennessee, Knoxville. They don't want to attend a community college for a semester. They want to go to UT Knoxville. The problem is under current state law, if they just need a little help for remedial coursework, they can't do that right now. So what the bill does is if UT Knoxville wants to participate, or Memphis, that they can offer this co-requisite remedial coursework where they can take the math freshman level course, assign themselves or get assigned a tutor under a lab, and they can help get this moving forward for them so they can stay at those colleges.
Yes, sir. Excuse me. Yes, you may ask more.
And as I understand, in general, tuition to go to UT or one of the universities like that, is that higher than going to one of the 2 years? So
that's a great question. Great question. So the answer is, yeah, it would cost you more money to go to University of Tennessee where you could use your Hope scholarship to pay for it. If the student decides, you know what, I don't want to burn my Hope scholarship on taking that course there, I want to go to a community college, still available to them. They can go back and use Tennessee Promise to take it at the community college if they want to. Even if it's offered at the four-year institution, the student doesn't have to take advantage of it. They can still go back to community college, use their promise. But if they have hope, they got to make sure they get re-enrolled there at the four-year institution to keep hope intact.
And
Yes,
a
please
couple more
continue.
follow-ups if I could. And you and I did discuss this, so you probably know where I'm going. Will there be any additional payments to the universities for doing these remedial classes above and beyond the normal tuition or fees or whatever that would be?
No, what would happen is the students who do want to take these courses, they would know that they would be assigned a lab. So once they're assigned the lab, they can look at it and see if it's economically feasible for them to do this. And if they don't, most high school seniors right now are being pushed into Promise to make sure they're prepared for it right now. So they could just take advantage of Promise and say, you know what, I'm going to pass on that right now, UT Knoxville. I'm going to go spend a semester down at Pillissippi State or Columbia State. I'll do my semester down there. I'll use my Promise money, and then I can transfer back to the University of Tennessee. Or they could stay at the community college for 2 years and then transfer to the four-year institution.
And the last comment. And again, we discussed this briefly one day for the newer members. We've done this in the past, way back when, where the universities could offer remedial classes. But they did, as I remember, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, they were paid additional money for the remedial classes above and beyond regular classes. And lo and behold, the number of remedial classes just continued to increase. It's almost as if those were more profitable classes. And as a result, we ended this practice. So the universities used to be able to do it. We changed the law where they couldn't for the reasons I just alluded to. And again, I'm dusting off very old memories here. But as I understand it, we're not going back to what it was we stopped in the past.
That's correct. We're not going to subsidize them for offering the remedial coursework. It would be part of a lab curriculum for them. And so that's when the student would have to look at, am I going to use my hope for this? Is it cost effective? And if not, they want to go back to a community college, still available to them.
And so I think it's something we need to be careful and just watch as time goes by, that we just don't slip into repeating mistakes we've made in the past. Thank you.
To follow up on that, that's correct. That's one of the jobs that we have, is to make sure we don't do that. And having someone here, as long as Mr. Leatherwood's been here, he can go back and reflect on past issues and past things that we've done. What this does is just prevent the opportunity. It proposes an opportunity for our four-year colleges that they could take advantage of this to allow a kid to stay in their colleges who really want to go to Martin, Tech, TSU, things like that.
Just for a privilege here, Representative Leatherwood used to be my state senator many years ago, so he knows some stuff, right?
Chairman Moody, he chose wisely to come back to the House.
That's right. Okay. Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Here's why I like this bill, is because it's student-focused, student-centered. If a student does want to go to a four-year, you said they have the option, why make them enroll in a community college, do all that enrollment process, take those courses, transform or not, and then go back to the process of going back to university. So I think this streamlines it for the student, and that's what we ought to be about, is helping our students do what is best for the student. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Members, I don't have anyone on. All right. I see Representative Hicks. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and thank you, Chairman, for bringing this.
Yes, sir.
Seems like a very good bill. Just to clarify, is the intention of the legislation for the universities to offer the co-requisite remediation, okay? And if they choose to offer that, and it's not quite in the language that way, so I think they're just wanting to clarify that that is the goal of this.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Chairman.
That is correct. We are taking out the part of law that forbids them from doing this and putting it back in as an option for them.
Any other questions?
Question on the bill?
All right. Question's been called and seconded. We will now be voting on House Bill 0029. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. All right, you will pass on to full. Now we'll turn the gavel back to Chairman Sapicki.
Okay, members, we're going to get into our presentations today. And a little bit of background here real quick. Chairman Moody and White and I have discussed this ad nauseum at times. You know, we are faced with a lot of challenges in education. And one of the things that we want to delve into today with our teachers who are here, and we say thank you for coming today, it's a privilege to be able to talk to you today, is we're looking for the why. Why, after 4 years of education, are 33% of our kids reading on grade level? Why? What are we not doing? What are we doing too much of? What are we not doing enough of? Who are we not listening to? And so we talked about this, and we were going to bring some teachers up and ask some teachers who want to come in and testify and just have a dialogue with us. Now, members, here's how it's going to work, okay? I'm going to let you go back and forth if you have questions, as long as we don't get adversarial. If we get adversarial, I'll gather you and make you go back and forth through the chair, okay? But I want to kind of get into a little bit of a free dialogue with you to ask the questions you want to ask, because we have the professionals here that can give us the answers. And we hope to have, with Chairman Moody, once we close this committee, we can continue on these discussions at the full committee so all of the members can hear what we're hearing at the same time. And then maybe we can reach out to some of our larger metropolitan cities and have those teachers come in and tell us about the challenges that they're facing. Okay? So first up here, we have Bradley County. Bradley County, if you'll come up to the chairs in front of you. And Vice Chair Rapier, if you'd like to introduce these ladies and welcome them to the General Assembly, go ahead.
I want to say welcome to my constituents and also my good friends, and they're also from the Cleveland area, but Bradley County and Bradley County Schools. So I want to say welcome to Dr. Linda Cash, which is the Director of Schools, Dr. Elizabeth Kaler, and Dr. Dana Yost, and they're part of her administrative staff. So welcome, and great to see you.
Ms. Cash serves on the textbook committee, I think is still chairman, is that correct? Yes, sir. No. You do a very fine job with that. Ladies, we're going to give you 5 minutes to start with, and then we'll get into some dialogue here, okay? So.
First, we just want to say thank you for allowing us to be here. It's a privilege.
Pull it closer to you.
I can speak. It's a privilege to be here. We are kind of going to tag team this, and we are proud to be here. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Yost to start us out. We're going to do a little lessons and then have y'all ask questions and then come to some conclusions.
So I think we all can agree to the importance of reading and the success that we want our students to have in terms of reading. Research shows that a child that does not learn the reading basics early on will unlikely ever learn them. Students learn reading through a systematic, organized, well-designed approach. Teaching reading is rocket science. And through these essential components in reading, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, that is how students learn to read and read well. And as you can see, phonemic awareness is taught K-1, phonics is taught K through the first part of third grade. Fluency is taught K through 5, vocabulary taught K through 12, and comprehension taught K through 8. At the link in this presentation, Reading Foundational Skills, you can learn more about each of these components and why they are important to the success of a child learning how to read. Because learning to read is a developmental process, we also realize that students do not acquire their literacy skills at the same rate. Therefore, in our school systems, we have tiered interventions. Tier 1 is the reading instruction that all students receive. Tier 2 is where we then start to identify that perhaps students are having trouble or falling behind in reading, and that is where we give them an additional 30 minutes of reading support. This support is aligned to the deficits that we identify in the students' reading. If we are tracking their, and we do track their process, and through that tracking we find that they are not catching up and we're not closing those gaps, then we place them in a Tier 3 intervention, which is an additional 60 minutes of reading instruction 4 to 5 days a week. Through that process, if we then feel that there is a learning disability, a referral will be made, and then perhaps a determination for a learning disability where they will receive Tier 4 instruction. So in this process, throughout the year, we are tracking students' performance. We are trying to identify their reading ability or their lack of. So we do administer the Tennessee Universal Reading Screener 3 times per year. It is age appropriate, and it does measure phonics and fluency from K to 3rd grade. We also administer a benchmark test 3 times per year, and it is aligned to the grade level standards, but it is an adaptive test, meaning that if a student is answering every question correctly, then the questions will progressively get more difficult. And vice versa. If they are having trouble answering questions on this benchmark assessment, then the questions become somewhat easier. And it allows us then to pinpoint the grade level in which this child is performing. For those students that we do place into tiered intervention for additional support, and even some of our ESL newcomer students or students that we're just scratching our head over, we may then give them progress monitoring. That progress monitoring tool, that assessment is given weekly, where then we are tracking their progress in terms of trying to determine whether or not the additional instructional support is working. And then if it isn't, our I-team comes together where we then discuss how this child is performing, their strengths and their weaknesses, their deficits, so then we can better align their support to meet their specific deficit and hopefully gain that progress. TCAP then is also the yearly test that we give beginning in 3rd grade. It is a state standardized test, as I'm sure you're well aware of. And please note that our teachers are not allowed to see this test. They administer this test, they proctor this test, but in no way are they allowed to view the test. It is TCAP standards analysis. We do receive those reports. And in these reports, and we have the link here, and Ms. Kaler will talk about this in more depth in just a few moments. In analyzing the 21 report to the 22 report, different standards are tested each year. And I think that might be an important note for you. Also, the 65th percentile is the measure of proficiency on 3rd grade ELA TCAP, which is above average. And our TCAP test does assess higher order thinking about reading skills.
So you heard Ms. Yost say that teaching reading is rocket science. Testing is not quite rocket science, but it is quite a lot of mathematics. And so I have for you the bell curve on the slide. That's also sometimes referred to as the normal curve equivalent, or NCE. And I want to direct you, I have a pointer, but it doesn't seem to show up very well on the screen, so I'm going to just try to describe this with color coding. I want you to pay attention to the middle line that's at the height of this curve. That is where the 50th percentile is located. That's the height of the curve because that's where the majority of the population falls statistically. So I want you to see that there's a green section highlighted around that 50th percentile, and that range is marking what is considered grade level performance. So students are above the 50th percentile and below the 50th percentile, still considered to be performing on grade level. The black dot that I have added is not a part of this bell curve. That was my own addition to mark where the 65th percentile is, because the 65th percentile is the place you need to rank in order to be considered passing the 3rd grade TCAP. So I want you to notice that that is asking a student to be at the higher end almost at the highest end of the average range in order to pass that particular assessment. And so that's an important distinction to understand when you are interpreting TCAP scores. Another thing to consider are where you see risks identified for students. These particular risks are with relationship to their literacy skills. So some risk begins to be evident in the yellow section, and then in the pink-red section is where the risk becomes high. What you will note is that yellow and that red align to the RTI percentiles that you heard Ms. Yost describing. So the Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports, those begin to come in place when students begin falling in those yellow and red categories. And by the way, the percentiles that align with those categories are below the 30th percentile, hovering right around 25th and below, with the red category starting at about the 15th percentile. Questions about that slide?
They're coming.
Okay. Okay. So one of the things that they told me not to go off script, but it's really hard for me, is we've talked about the difference between proficiency and grade level. So I'd like for you to keep that in mind as we move forward. There is a difference between proficiency and being at grade level. So what we know from others, in Texas in the year 2006, it cost them over $2 billion to implement a retention law for only 1 year. And that was where they had about 200 students that were retained. The academic benefits of retention rarely last more than 1 year, which prevents catch-up from occurring, and often that gain that they have is short-lived as well. Research shows that over time, promoted students continue to outperform retained students over time. So as the time span goes and you're putting in all these other interventions, as long as you're continuing to intervene, you have growth in those students unless you're finding something else. Something that I really want us to think about is sometimes the unintended consequences. An increased dropout rate, and many of you may have been around in Tennessee when our dropout rate was pretty much atrocious. And through those intervention states, we've increased that. We feel and know that the dropout rate will continue just because of the age of the students if we retain. Removal of the parent and educator input, elimination of athletic participation and scholarships for 19-year-olds, which I did not know was a valid point, so I asked. And it's if you turn 19, if that cutoff is in August, then you are not valid to play sports. I don't have enough information to delve into that. That was new for me. The social emotional negativity, the longer and the older they get for retention, those social emotional issues still pop up and they start to have more issues. Our TCAP expectation for passing is above average, and our TCAP LEA measures more than the ability to read. So we're measuring more skills than just reading skills on that TCAP. Recommendation 1, I would like to consider if you are looking at resetting the TCAP categories. If you use a 5 category, and if you click, the categories are explained, to include a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, with that 3 range being passing from the 30 to 50 and proficient moving up. We also would like option 2, if we stick with our 4th categories, which is what we have now, goes back to that bell curve, the grade level, general acquisition of literary skills, that 26 to 50, they have the ability to acquire those skills, but it may not be at the level that of complexity that's required at that 65th percentile. And then that proficient, that's grade level content with complexity, and then advanced is the 76 to 99, full mastery of standards, some skills beyond grade level. I always talk about some people love to read and can sit and read War and Peace. So those are going to be the kids that are very far behind. And then you have those average kids, those C students who read when they need to, but they can still be proficient in that grade level. So as you look at these and you click that 5th category, it will explain as other states are using that 1 through 5. So just wanted to point that out to you. We recommend that we reset that scale either using last year's scores or this year's scores for resetting the norm. Utilizing consistent testing of reading standards from year to year. You got it?
Yes. So there was linked in a previous slide a comparison of a standards analysis from 2021 and the same report for 2022. These are reports directly from our school district regarding TCAP performance of our students. And what we want you to notice is when you look down the list of standards numbers, you see from one year to the next, there are different numbers. The same standards are not tested in consecutive years, nor are the same number of standards tested. So in one year, far more standards were tested than in the year immediately following it. So it makes it very difficult for a teacher to hit a designated mark on an assessment because the transparency of exactly which standards they will be assessing are not known for them. Another recommendation to consider is that, as you heard mentioned before, our TCAP assessment is assessing English language arts. It is not assessing only reading. So when a third grader takes this assessment, they are being assessed on what could be any one of a possible 83 English language arts standards. Those include speaking skills, writing skills, grammar skills, a number of things in addition to their actual ability to read. While those are all very important, and I do not discredit any of them, it's important to have that knowledge when you are interpreting TCAP scores. Furthermore, I believe that multiple data sources give you the most thorough picture of a child. So you see a number of sources listed here on the bullets here. When one test overweighs the comparison of data from other tests, it often creates test anxiety for a child. They begin to believe that everything I do is riding on this one moment, and if I mess it up, there is no hope for me. And we certainly do not want students feeling that way, and we do not want test anxiety to be driving long-term decisions that we would make regarding students' education. So we believe that considering multiple data sources will better inform decisions regarding retention or tutoring, summer camps, or any of the other interventions that we might provide for them. And then our final point on this slide is the importance of kindergarten through second grade. These are the years where foundations are built. Sometimes a student enters kindergarten already behind. You can ask any kindergarten teacher and they can share with you stories of students in their class who might actually be on a 4-year-old or 3-year-old level, although the remainder and the chronological age of that child is actually 5. And so when that occurs, we are trying to make catch-up growth before we have ever even gotten out of the gate. And that catch-up growth is very important. But while that child needs catch-up growth, all the other children are already making annual growth. And so oftentimes solving the problem of a student who has entered school behind their peers takes more than 1 year to accomplish. And it takes a lot of interventions. Excellent instruction can address these needs, but you often need supports for students who are starting out behind.
So we really want to thank you for some of the things that you've brought to us. Funding, equipping to meet our needs, tutoring for at-risk students who we believe is the best approach. The literacy laws have focused attention on a much-needed area of education, and that is how early do we intervene and what do we do, and we thank you for that. The opportunity to speak today shows your interest in having our input, and we are more than welcome to have those open conversations with you. Again, we believe K2 is where we really need to focus and put our needs, and again, we appreciate you, and we're open for any questions.
Members. We're going to take a list, so if you got something to say, raise your hand. We'll get a list real quick. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to let everybody else go first, and maybe you'll ask some of the questions I'm going to ask, okay? We'll start with Chairman Reagan, because I know he saw the bell curve, and he's probably all excited about the bell curve.
I thought he'd like that too.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that, by the way, Dr. Yostin. You're right, a lot of mathematics is involved, but some simple, straightforward questions. Testing as a measurement depends on 2 criteria, validity and repeatability. Validity means, are we testing what we think we're testing? Excuse me, my watch is arguing with me. Are we testing what we think we're testing? And the repeatability, if we measure it multiple times, do we get close to the same answer? So from what I've heard here, you're attacking the validity of the TCAP test. Is that correct?
I don't know if I would term it that way exactly, but I will say that it is difficult to know, we are provided a blueprint that will tell us there's a certain percentage of this type of question, or there's a certain percentage of these standards in this range that will be assessed. But when you look at the actual standards after the fact, after the test has been given, you can clearly see on the report different standard numbers that were assessed. And those reports are linked. Do you have a copy of this? If not, I'm happy to share one so you can actually see the reports.
Please share it with me.
Yes, absolutely.
Follow up?
Go ahead.
On that basis, then, the company that the state engaged to create this test, I believe it was Pearson, creates tests for other states.
Correct.
So is our state test that different from other states?
Well, TCAP is unique to the state of Tennessee, so we are the only state administering that particular assessment.
That's true for that particular point, but I think you're missing my point. Our standards might be worded slightly different, but the question is the overall standard that we're trying to measure against, the validity of that standard versus, say, pick another state, Connecticut. Are we measuring the same kind of criteria that they're measuring? Is that what or yes or no?
I believe our standards are probably similar to their standards, and I don't have a question or concern at all about the standards, and I don't even actually have any concerns about the test or the design of the test. I think we just have to understand what the purpose of that test was. I'm not sure it was ever originally designed to determine whether a student should pass or fail a grade, and so that's the part I guess I wanted to illuminate, was just having an understanding of what that test tells us about a child, and whether or not we are really knowing only a child's reading ability when we look at an ELA TCAP score.
One last follow-up.
Go ahead.
I'll turn it over. So to follow up on that line of reasoning, we're left with the question of students in other states, or if they're taking a similar test, they have the same kind of test anxiety. They have all the other things that you're talking about our students would have, and yet students in other states are doing almost 100% better than we are. The latest data I saw was 66% of our students are not reading on grade level, however you define it, but there's other states that have 66% of their students reading on grade level. So completely on the other side of the zero on our number line. If it's a question of stupidity, I don't think our Tennessee students are more stupid.
They are not.
So is it a question of a bad test? Is that what you're saying? Or is it a question of us not doing a good job in preparing them for it?
Well, I am not sure where the cut falls for other states. I'm very familiar with TCAP, but I have not spent this time researching other states' assessments, so I don't know if their pass rate is based on the 65th percentile. It's hard for me to make a comparison because I'm just not familiar with those other states' tests. But when you say that we have this percentage of students not on grade level, really what that statement is that that percentage of students are not at the 65th percentile.
Chairman Reagan.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I admit I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I did go on and look at other state test samples. They had samples available. In a couple of the that I went through, they were not testing the entirety of the number of standards that they were broken down into literacy standards, which were foundational skills and comprehension and informational text, whereas ours encompasses much more than that. So there was a difference in some of the ones that I looked at versus the state of Tennessee. I also noticed that most of those states that I looked at were including in their proficiency rates or their pass rates, I think they use the word pass rates, those approaching students as well at a much lower rank than Tennessee was. So our standards are very rigorous. They really are. They're great standards. But when I looked across at the test itself, there was a difference in what they were assessing for that cut score or that reading score. So maybe that helps you as far as when I looked at a couple of states and I did see a difference in what they were using to determine that pass rate.
Mr. Chair, that was going to be my last question, but this has brought up another one.
Let me do this. Let me.
I'll come back to it.
Let me come back. Let me interject a question in here right now. Currently, in the retention bill, there's been a rule promulgated, or however you want to talk about it, that says if a student scores in the 40th percentile on the last benchmark, that could be used for promotion. Do you believe that that last benchmark gives us a true evaluation tool of the ability of that student to read and comprehend, so that we can have confidence that a child that scores in the 40th percentile on the last benchmark, even if they failed a TCAP, as an administrator, you have confidence to say that that student is on grade level?
I have confidence, and they may want to correct me, in that that gives us another measure to look at. So instead of having one measurement, which you should never do in statistics, you are looking at multiple measures. It gives you that second measurement to say, yes, they're in that range or they're not in that range. So yes, I believe that is a step in the right direction. That is the screener that we would use. It's not the benchmark. So I would even include that third piece that is the benchmark, and then you have a really strong look at that student to say, and it's not just about retention, it's about what interventions do they need? Are we providing the right interventions? Are we tailoring the tutoring for them? So it gives us a multiple layered look at that student rather than just the one.
Chairman Sapicki, I would add to that, it's my understanding that you have to apply for an appeal in order for that 40th percentile on the universal screener to be applicable. And you can only apply for an appeal if you were first in the approaching category when you took the TCAP test.
But it's still there,
It is still there.
still there. Let's go to Chairman White.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm trying to get my thoughts together. I'm going to be Pacific in that I agree with you. We need to be focusing on K1 and 2.
Yes, sir.
Personally, I'm glad we passed the third grade retention in 21 because now we can have this conversation. To be talking about retaining a third grader, an 8-year-old, as I told y'all earlier, we've already missed the mark.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm trying to figure out what we need to be doing in K1 and 2, and y'all pointed out in the phonics, fluency, vocabulary, phonemic awareness, and all. So my question is this. So it sounds like your position is it's not good to hold back an 8-year-old.
That's correct.
Correct. And that it would be better to use some other benchmark universal screeners along with the TCAP in determining whether a child moves on.
That is correct.
Okay. So my question is this: how do we get this right now that we have the opportunity and time? We just passed this in 20, hasn't gone into place yet. And, you know, we got bills in front of us we got to deal with. So I'm asking specific questions. Some of the bills say, well, let's go back and let the locals make the determination. And as you know, we passed that in 2011, and here we are 11 years later. I know every LEA is not the same. Some have possibly more competent people on it than others. So what have we been missing for the past 11 years when we let the locals make this, when you're making such great points?
Do you want me to take it? I think they're looking at me. So I'm going to go back to around 2008. 2008 was about the time, it may have been a little bit earlier, when the first literacy bill came out, third grade. At that time, we were really not focused on interventions, and that's, I'm just being honest with you. RTI was there, but we weren't really focused on it, and we didn't have scientific methods that we were using to even teach the literacy skills. Those lower levels, we had a whole reading approach. Our approach simply was not there. So when you did the third grade, the first third grade, that was, okay, now you've got to kick in these interventions for these kids. And so we started with that intervention process. And so I think over time that we've become better at that. But remember, in Tennessee, we just recently implemented that K2, now we do K6, K5 interventions in the literacy with the phonics, phonemic awareness. That should be showing us where kids are behind. What I think we missed was, the honest, that first level of instruction, that base instruction, level 1 instruction, what happens in the classroom when the teachers walk in, we missed it. We were doing things that did not actually teach them to decode, or we were doing it in addition to instead of focusing on it. So we missed that boat. So we weren't holding a lot of kids back because we thought they performed well in the classroom. So as they performed well in the classroom, we didn't use all the data that was at our disposal to make those decisions. I feel like now we have come a long way in utilizing data and really digging down into what a kid needs with the diagnostics that we have, with the benchmarks that we have, the screeners. But I will tell you, I do want to, although it did not sit well, and you guys know it didn't sit well, because the word is that we're going to retain all third graders. We're not retaining all third graders, but we should be focusing on where are their holes, where are we plugging those holes, and how are we doing it. And I think that's where we are now. I think our failure was not really looking at the why. Why are these kids not able to decode? Why are these kids? And it's because we really weren't zeroing in on those foundational skills.
Go ahead.
So it sounds like, and thank you, that's very helpful to me. So it sounds like we may be kind of on track now that we weren't on track before in our locals.
I believe so, and I want to applaud the department in one area of actually getting out and making that training available. And this body, this legislative body, is saying you will teach foundational skills. I can tell you from Bradley County, 7 years ago when we actually pulled in and started, it was not an easy task. It was actually kicking and screaming. So making that you are going to do this was a giant leap forward.
Okay. Last point, Chairman, if I can make it.
You're good.
Okay. Okay, now we're going to work on this, K1 and 2. We keep doing that. But we have a decision to make this year based upon the law as it currently stands. And, we've all gotten all the emails, and we know where everybody stands on that. Okay, here's my question. We've got to make a decision this year on the third grade retention. In 2020, 2021, we closed our schools down. The kid was in first grade. So he had virtual most of the rest of that year. When they did come back, now they're in second grade, a lot of them were still wearing masks. And from my understanding, you can't teach phonics and phonemic awareness if the teacher's got on a mask and the kids have on masks.
You are
That's
correct.
So that's first and second grade in 2021, 20 through 22. And then in 2022, 2023 is where they are now in third grade, and we're getting ready to hold them back. So is there any credibility to my thinking is that this year we may be up a unique problem that we need to address?
These are the students. Well, I don't want to be the one. Do you want to?
And I don't want to excuse the fact if they can't read, they can't read. We got to figure this out because we're hurting them down
sir.
the road too.
I think this unique group of students are a group that we've never seen before, because not only did they go through a pandemic, then they missed initial education, they also missed that relationship with the teacher and seeing those sounds and watching the faces. But you also have social emotional issues that honestly we're still struggling with. So I think it would be more detrimental to this group to start the retention at this point. But I want to come again, that does not mean that you do not put those interventions in place and you do not do the tutoring. All those things have to happen. If we don't have those interventions, we're not going to move these kids, and that is a mistake. So for any of us to think that we can just say, hey, let's do whatever we did before, that is a mistake. We have to have those extra pieces in there. We have to have the interventions. You have to have the 90 minutes plus the 45 plus the 30 if you're going to move those kids. And there's no mistaking in it. We can't just say, let's go do whatever we've done before. This body, along with a lot of people, firmly believe that we can move kids, and we appreciate that, but I do not believe retention is the answer. There are a handful of kids that retention is the answer, but you also have to remember all they've come through. So if you're asking me, is this year's third grader, is that the one we need to be holding back? I would say no, because they have struggled from kindergarten, first, second. We're still catching them up. Our scores show that we are moving forward. We've had gains the last 3 years in that grade group in our third grade, but the interventions have been powerful. The tutoring has been powerful, and you cannot remove that support from our districts.
Very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So let me expand on this for you real quick. The question that Chairman White asked was very interesting, because we are focused on this group of third graders.
Yes.
But this inadequacy in education has been going on for a decade.
Right.
There wasn't a pandemic 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and we're still stuck at this 33% grade level. And to Chairman Reagan's point, we're pretty much all taking the same test across the state. We may have different marks of what we're saying is proficient and not. But there has to be something that we're not identifying that has us stuck at this 33%. And for that matter, some of the best in the country are maybe in the 50s and 60s. It almost seems like because of the pandemic, we're willing to make an excuse, an exception for these kids, that as they move forward in education, the data shows us that once they're behind, it is extremely difficult to get them caught up as they transition into middle school because the rigor gets even worse for them and harder for them, and they fall further and further and further behind.
Without interventions.
Even with the interventions, because we look at our TCAP scores, our third grade literacy rate, roughly 33%, falls in the 20s in eighth grade and falls even further than that in high school. So there's what we're looking at here. What is prohibiting? What is the problem that we are facing in K1 and 2 that's leading to this? You keep talking about RTI, pulling the kid out of the classroom to go to RTI, pulling the kid out of the classroom to go do this. After you, we're going to hear from teachers that complain to us saying, I can't teach my kids because they're gone all the time. How do we make up what they miss when they're gone getting the help to get them caught up? It's almost a perpetual cycle where they leave class to get caught up, but because they're away from class, they get behind. Then they leave class to go get caught up, and they get behind because they're out of class. Teachers are telling me that they don't have enough time to teach anymore, right? Do we have too many standards? Are our standards actually measuring exactly what we want to measure in our students? Are we breaking our TCAP test up into reading and comprehension, and then a slash mark, writing and other skills? Because we talk about our kids can't read on grade level, right? Is our TCAPS test, are we holding our kids accountable for reading, comprehension, writing, and all the other parts of ELA, when our main concern is, can they read and comprehend what we're telling them? Do they have depth, knowledge, and understanding of what we're trying to teach them? And our teachers are telling us they don't have enough time to do it. It's a circular equation we keep talking about here. I've been here for 5 years. Chairman White, how long have you been here? 14 years. We've been having this conversation for probably even before 14 years. But we're reaching a critical mass here in education. That the Tennessee that we all love right now, that people are coming to, we have to be turning out a well-educated student. So what is an issue that you can tell us that if you were the legislators, that you would say in K through 2, change this, and we can get better results? What would that be?
Well, I appreciate very much the tutoring that this law has already provided to us. I think that's something that's on the right track. I think that's a good piece. But I think it may need to be sustained for a longer period of time. When a student is perhaps multiple years behind, then it is going to take multiple years to close that gap. I don't know if you're familiar with this book. It's called Annual Growth for All Students and Catch-Up Growth for Those Who Are Behind. It is not an easy read, but if you like statistics, you might love this book. It really does talk about how every student needs annual growth, and excellent instruction will get that for them. But when a student is behind, you have to make the annual growth and then some. And the and then some may not be a whole nother year's growth. You might not make 2 years growth in 1 year, but if you made 1.5 years growth in 1 year, and then the next year you also made 1.5 years growth, over time, in 2 years, you might have made 3 years of growth. But it does take sustained time and commitment on the part of everyone in the school. So not just the teacher who wants her students in front of her long enough to teach them and them not gone to an intervention, but the administrator who's creatively scheduling things so that students get all the parts of the day that they need in just the right times and ways. It's a lot of moving parts, but I believe it can be done.
Representative Hakeem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And ladies, thank you very much. You have enlightened me, and I need some more enlightening, so I'm going to ask a few questions here. When we talk about, I guess, whether we'll say the last decade, what has not transpired during that course of that time period, have we been, when I say we, the legislature or anybody, been asking for results or test, well, an understanding of what's happening, we'll say every 2 years? Or is it just we put something in place and it's just been going on for a decade, and now we look at it and say it's not working the manner in which we thought it would?
So I know I'm probably the most senior, but I would tell you when the initial third grade retention law went in place, it was an aha, but there was not a lot of pressure. And I'm just being open and honest with you. And now we're at the point where there is a tremendous amount of pressure. And I think that pressure is not bad as long as it's not one data point that you're looking at. I think that we needed to change the way we were teaching reading in that K-1-2. We needed to have all the phonics and the phonemic awareness, and that we needed all of that. The training that it takes to get a teacher to be proficient at that takes a long time. We were not doing that. And as far as your body, we were looking at scores, and then around that time we had a false or inflated look at the state of Tennessee. And then we went very, very, very far right to say, okay, let's make these standards as rigorous as we can. So we went from maybe a low level of standards to a high level of standards. And I would not change our standards. I think that we need to hold our kids and our teachers accountable. But we also have to remember, is what we're asking for on the test, is it in the K-1, 2, and 3, are we looking at reading skills, or as our chairman said, are we looking at writing, and all the, what are we really looking for? When I start looking at other tests across the states, they focus in on those early grades, to be honest with you, and they're looking at only those fluency skills, all of those with comprehension and vocabulary. They have a later date where they're assessing writing. It's not that they're not teaching it, but they're assessing it at a later date. The other thing, when we talk about standards, we were just talking about the number of standards that are in social studies and science that our teachers are also responsible for teaching. And they're not just, they're very specific standards that are from memory. They're not, they're naming states, they're doing all of that. Maybe if we looked at making those more literacy-based versus just, can you name this, can you do this, reading timelines, reading skills, but I think we need to reassess those what are we looking for? Do we really want to focus and have our teachers focus on reading and math? We do not want to forget about math, because if you forget about math, you're going to have a dip in math, and that is even harder, believe it or not, to pull up. So we focus K-1, 2, 3, reading and math. And if we're doing social studies and science, it should be embedded with all those literacy and reading skills and not separate memorization. That is just from my teachers and from my supervisors saying, where's our focus? And I think that's what I'm hearing you guys say, where is our focus? I do think we need to analyze the test. I honestly believe that. I think we need a deep analysis on the test. Is that test teaching the reliability and the validity? Is it teaching what we really want our students to know? Are we testing what we want our students to know? And I think Tennessee is known for having and wanting to be our own state and our own standards. So if that's it, let's look at that test and see what standards do we want to say this kid can do X if we reach these standards, and let's test those standards year after year after year so that we can see, are we progressing, are we bouncing around with the standards that we test?
Okay, thank you on that. When we deal with intervention, I think I heard that if we start intervention and stop it, we could lose what we've gained.
Yes.
With the young people. To that end, I wanted to ask, we talk a lot about summer intervention. Is it too much to think about year-round intervention when we look at what the children have gone through, particularly in the past few years, and what we have not been doing, we'll say, for the past decade? Would it benefit more to have that intervention year-round? And, I guess I'm asking you a hypothetical, just your thoughts on it.
So actually, Ms. Yost, we were really talking about the value of the tutoring, that we firmly believe that tutoring is the most powerful thing that we can do. And if we can have that tutoring all year round and be very targeted on the tutoring, which if they're moving in the way the law stands now, fourth graders would have to have the tutoring all year. But during the day, after school, before school. But one of the things that they brought up was that there are kids that we want to tutor them after school, but now we're looking at a transportation transportation issue. In all honesty, the students that are living in poverty, our educationally disadvantaged students, those are economically disadvantaged students. Those are the ones that we're saying we're going to have to pull them up, but we'd have to provide transportation because a lot of their parents. I remember being in a system where a parent literally would tell me, "I don't have the gas to come and get my kid." That is a real thing. And if people don't believe that's a real thing, then you haven't taught and worked in the areas that I've had the privilege of teaching in. So we would need to provide transportation and, define what is all year. Offering tutoring all year, I would say absolutely. I think you're going to get a stronger impact with tutoring than you are just hosting summer school activities where you're doing large groups of kids.
Okay. Now, when we talk about the needs of children, we'll say that are outside the classroom. You spoke of travel. I agree with you. That can be a problem, transportation. Have you seen, I don't know, you can have so much on your plate. Have you been able to tell if hunger is a problem for a group of children? The home environment, has that been part of the problem?
Yes. One of the things that I would tell you is, and I would think this is probably true in most districts now, is the SAC Pack program. We are sending food home on the weekends. We are trying to target, we have food closets. We have food pantries, closets for toiletries. We're trying to provide those that needed opportunities without being embarrassed or without saying, so it's the way you deliver it. But in the after-school activities, we are providing snacks and trying to provide healthy snacks through our school nutrition program. The summer feeding program is also very valuable, but I think that's a part of it. I'll give you an example. I had a school this morning, the electricity was out, and I was debating, okay, how am I going to handle this? Because they're telling me it'll be back on in 2 hours, it'll be back on in 3 hours. So I finally made a decision, get them to school, feed them breakfast, and then let's look at it from that point. So I recognize that for some kids that is an issue. Not for all, but for some.
One last question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're on a hard stop here at 4, so.
Okay.
Because I got to get to the teachers coming up after this. Go ahead.
Okay. That was a quote you had on the screen, Mary Bethune-Cookman. Wait a minute, Mary McLeod Bethune. The whole world opened up to me when I learned to read. Are there opportunities to express to children the value of reading? And quite frankly, sometimes when you have someone, I'll use the term, who looks like them or come from the same community they did, that inspires them. I don't know if any of that plays in a role in what you're trying to do.
Well, obviously, I'm going to come from a different background and a different era, but what I've seen, and this is my honest truth, my daughter-in-law, whom I truly love, teaches in a very high poverty level school that is a high minority. They absolutely love her. And she brings excitement to that classroom. She tells them they're valuable, they can do whatever they want to do. So I think, yes, there is some connection to that, but I believe that teacher in the classroom, no matter who they are or what background they come through, if they love those kids and they're making relationships with those kids and they challenge those kids, they will rise to the occasion. That is my honest and fair belief.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ladies, we got a hard stop for you right now because I got to get some teachers up here behind you. We do appreciate you coming in. If you could not go anywhere, because I'm sure you're going to have some questions afterward. Representative Johnson, I'll give you first questions on the teachers when we come back to them, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have teachers here from District 92, I believe. Representative Warner, if you'll introduce the people who have come up. And ladies, come up. And we hopefully have enough seats for you and microphones.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have Ms. Vicki Carlton, Ms. Jan Salzman, Ms. Rebecca McKay, Ms. Nikki Randolph, Ms. Lori Clark, and Ms. Sherry Campbell, all from Marshall County. And we're glad you're here, ladies.
Ladies, thank you for coming here today. We want to give you some time to talk to us, too. Ms. Cash is well-versed in what she does, and she brings great people up here to talk to us. And we want to get a perspective from teachers at the basic level and tell us where, you guys, it's where the rubber meets the road. And so if you ever want to start out, just introduce yourself and then go ahead and start talking. And we've got about 30 minutes here. So Representative Johnson will get the first question to you, okay?
Hello, everyone. Good
Make sure your microphone's pressed. Looks like someone's talking. It'll turn red.
Push it.
There we go. First of all, I'm glad that the ladies went before us, because to me, that gives you all a bigger picture. I think what we're going to do is kind of take it down to the school level, and you're going to hear some individual stories. My name is Nikki Randolph. I'm actually an assistant principal in Marshall County at a second and third grade school. I was born and raised in Marshall County. I taught middle school math for 17 years, and I have been an administrator for the last 6 years. I want to tell you a story about a very special student that I was introduced to about 4 years ago, and we're going to call him G. G was placed at our school due to a DCS report because he was not going to school at all. I met him and his mom at the door and gave them both a tour of our school. When I asked him his name, he said D instead of G because he could not pronounce the G sound. Everything was new to him. His eyes lit up as he discovered something new and different around every corner of the building, even the cubbies where the students stored their backpacks. G quickly became my little buddy. I'd walk him through the cafeteria line because he didn't know how to get his lunch. I would sit and eat lunch with him because he didn't know how to open his milk carton. We had orange slices one day, and he bit the entire piece because he didn't know he wasn't supposed to eat the peeling. He got a piece of broccoli one day, and he stuck it up his nose, and then he politely offered it to me. And I happily declined. And he said, "Oh, come on, Miss Randolph," not understanding why the broccoli was not appealing to me anymore. He would draw inappropriate pictures on the whiteboards and on the papers because he was allowed to watch inappropriate movies while at home. But he was so happy being at school. He struggled to figure out how to make friends, but he came every day with a smile. He did not qualify for an IEP because we couldn't rule out lack of instruction, which was his problem. No exposure to grade level curriculum or any curriculum of that matter. And he was turning 8 on Halloween. We didn't need any policies, laws, and mandates to tell us how to help this young man and his mother. And it didn't matter how he got to that point. We just met him where he was, and when he made progress, we adjusted. Those are those interventions that these ladies are talking about. And we had to be very, very creative with this young man's interventions. G was at our school for 2 years. His teachers loved him. We worked through issues with his family, and he figured out how to make friends, and he thrived in our building. On the last day of school, his third grade year, G read some lines from a science fiction book to myself and the principal, and he was reading. And he didn't understand why we were crying. You see, G was moving on to a different school, still with no IEP, no 504 plan. He could read, and he had made amazing progress. That's that growth that those ladies were talking about. That's so important. We made sure to let his new school and his new teachers know about his circumstances and bragged about his progress. But we knew he still had some work to do. And those teachers were going to have some work to do with him. If this third grade retention law would have been in effect and would have been pushed the way it is now, when G was with us, he would have been retained. Because although he could read, he struggled with test taking and had a serious focus problem. Everything he had worked so hard for those 2 years would have meant nothing. His teachers would have been labeled level 5 teachers because they would have made a year's worth of growth with G. Yet G would have been retained. That doesn't make sense. Here's why we needed to hear this story about this very special student of mine, like many across the state of Tennessee. He came to us severely behind academically, socially, but he made progress. There was no policy, no law that really addressed this specific student's needs. This third grade retention law is not effective for students like G and the many others that are making progress with interventions in place, who may, one, just not be good test takers, who just may not have had a good night's sleep, or who may not have had a good meal, or whose parents just got arrested. Because those are the kids that we see. Our schools are short-staffed already, and it will be beyond impossible to make intervention groups small enough to be the most effective for students already struggling if we retain third grade students primarily based on one data point. The data from our last benchmark at my school showed that our third grade students are making progress with these interventions that we are providing to help close those gaps. But because we meet those students where they are, we're able to move them. And I know that there's a standard for that. I know that that movement may not be at the pace that we want it to be right now, but I promise you guys that these interventions that we are putting in place, and the tutoring is I think we need to definitely make sure that we keep that. But our interventions in our RTI program are working. Teachers in our local districts know what's best for our students. Please don't take that away from us. So as we continue to make decisions about what we think is best for our students, I always just remember you to remember my buddy, G. Thank you for your time and attention.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Red light.
Oops. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. And I'm not a public speaker, as you're going to figure out very quickly. My name is Sherry Campbell. I teach secondary math at Cornersville High School in southern Marshall County. One of the math courses that I teach is Integrated Math 2. So for Math 2, which as with any high school math course, there's so many standards that I have to teach that I literally have to teach a new concept every day. As you all know, math has to be practiced to be understood. With the number of standards, it's difficult to allow students adequate practice time, not to mention remediation time. Because all students are on college path, all are required to go at the same pace. It's very frustrating to look at the faces of my students and know they're not ready to move on, yet we have to. I'm sure that we all can remember our days as students when a fellow student would need help to grasp concepts. The teacher would help them. They might peer up with other students. Oftentimes, the parents would be there to support them as well. When we were in school, many of us, the teacher, student, parent, we were a team and we worked together for the betterment of the student. While we have remediation time built in our school schedule, the struggling student never catches up. These students feel frustrated day in and day out. Many of these students struggle with emotional and relational issues, and to be honest, they shut down because of the continual feeling of defeat. Unfortunately, some simply become apathetic about their learning and their future, which has a strong impact on our work ethic as they enter the workforce. Education programs in college prepare us to assess learning and the steps involved in reteaching and mastery. We are actually going against what the professionals in the field prepared us to do. Teaching requires flexibility and constant adjusting to the needs of the student. While we appreciate the wanting to push our students to attain higher academic goals than we have in the past, we are seeing the need to back up and punt. Sometimes setting the bar high is an effective way to challenge people to think differently or work harder. But if we require more of them than they are capable of taking in, we can't force it to happen. Just as you wouldn't pick the slower runner to play in a running back position on a football team, most of our students should not be expected to learn at the current pace. I want to leave you with a conversation that I recently had with one of my students. This student struggles academically as well as with his self-esteem. And to be quite honest, he can be a knucklehead. He came in early one morning for tutoring and was discouraged because he was having a hard time understanding some of the math concepts. He was behind, trying to get him caught up. And I told him, I said, I want you to understand something. You may never use many of these math skills that you're being taught, but you need to know one thing, that somebody cares about you. I care about you, and I care about every other student in my classroom. Many of these students don't know that. They don't hear that. They don't have that parental support. Thank you for allowing us to speak today. We really appreciate it.
My glasses on. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Jan Salzman. I have been an elementary school teacher for 21 years. I have taught 2nd and 4th grade, and I am currently a 3rd grade math teacher. Today, I would like to share with you some of the expectations of our kindergarten through 3rd grade students. As teachers, we want our students to be successful as much as anyone. However, many of our standards are not age appropriate. I asked my teachers at my school to share with me one or more of the standards they feel fall into this category. I would like to begin with kindergarten. The kindergarten standard I was given was determine or clarify the meaning of unknown and multiple meaning words and phrases based on kindergarten conversations, reading, and content. It was brought to my attention that understanding words with multiple meanings is not developmentally appropriate for children in kindergarten who are learning letter sound relationships. They also gave to me use words and phrases acquired through conversations, reading and being read to, and responding to texts. Kindergartners have difficulty verbally expressing themselves. Therefore, they are not able to understand or use the writing process. 1st grade shared with me a math and writing. 1st grade math expects students to apply properties of operations, additive, identity, commutative, and associative as strategies to add and subtract. Students need to be able to add and subtract, not worry about the terminology of the 1st grade level. 1st graders are expected to write with prompting and support opinion pieces, including the topic or text, stating an opinion, supplying a reason for the opinion, and providing some sense of closure. 1st graders are also expected to write informative and explanatory text, supplying some facts about the topic and some sense of closure. And finally, 1st graders are expected to write a narrative recounting an event, including some details to describe actions and thoughts and feelings, using time order words to signal event order and provide some sense of closure. These students should be focusing on writing a complete sentence with capital letters and punctuation. Opinion writing, informative writing, and narrative writing should not be focused on in 1st grade. 2nd grade expressed the same concerns about the writing and also suggested that instead of having this be mastery, to introduce this type of writing, but not to expect students to perform at a mastery level. My 2nd grade teachers are concerned with the number of standards that we are expected to teach by the middle of April for our end-of-year testing. I teach math, so I wanted to share with you how many standards each student teach in math. Kindergarten teaches 26 math standards. First grade, 22. Second grade, 26. Third grade, 34. Fourth grade, 34. Fifth grade, 34. And sixth grade, 42. I would also like to share with you that even though Common Core has been dropped from our standards, we are still teaching them to prepare for our end-of-year testing. We are trying to teach too much in a short period of time. My third grade teachers are concerned with the third grade retention law. Many students do not test well, and we are hoping that this law will be reconsidered with appropriate changes, made to accommodate those students who are good students, but not good test takers. Finally, I would like to address with you a third grade math skill. I chose this skill because it seems to me to be the hardest that my third graders can get. Relate area of rectangles to the operations of multiplication and addition. Recognize area as additive. Find areas of rectangular figures by decomposing them into non-overlapping rectangles and adding the areas of the non-overlapping parts. Applying this technique to solve real-world problems, my third grade students' brains are not ready for this type of problem. Our lower level students need to go back to working on the basics of education, reading and math. Students in grades K through 3 need to focus on these more in depth than these higher level. Not that I'm saying we don't want our students to be better prepared, but as students grow, the development does grow. We're trying to do too much. As I'm looking at this panel, I'm seeing that most of you are my age. We were taught basic math, reading. Look where you are. Look where I am. We turned out okay. I think if we treat our students the way we were treated, they're going to turn out okay as well. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
So here is the brutal reality. We got a hard stop at 4:30 because criminal justice is coming in here right after us. So you three ladies, we got 10 minutes. So you go ahead, go.
Honorable committee members, my name is Lori Clark, and this is my 30th year as a teacher. During this time, I have taught elementary, middle, and high school levels. I've taught special ed, education inclusion, resource, and integrated math 1 class, and most recently, a special ed comprehensive development classroom. During my tenure as a teacher, I've worked numerous part-time jobs, most with the school system, as do many educators. Some of those jobs have included teaching a GED class, 15 years with the Tennessee Infant Parent Services, which works with birth to 3-year-old clients, extended years homebound with 2 different school systems, and other jobs. I've literally worked with a 2-week-old infant up to a 56-year-old man. You could say I'm a well-rounded educator, and I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I no longer know if it's worth it. I have 3 points that decide if it's worth it. Time taken from my family and struggling to support said family as a single parent. My daughter, as many educators' children, is as comfortable at school as she is at home. She's used to spending time before school, after school, and during holidays in my classroom as I work. She's used to our home time being interrupted by me grading papers, completing other paperwork, or answering emails and calls of other parents or co-workers. A good portion of our summer is spent in the classroom getting ready for the next school year. Teachers typically expect to work 2 jobs. Many, myself included, are overwhelmed by the amount of responsibilities placed on us, and as I said, in the past, I've worked 2 jobs. This is no longer a possibility if I'm going to be the teacher that my students need. This impacts my standard of living and my child's. It also impacts the availability of services for our school kids. The Tennessee Department of Education states on their website there are more than 1,200 teacher vacancies across the state. This means more students in fewer classrooms, fewer teachers to provide school tutoring and enrichment services, more work for already overworked teachers, and students having to participate in virtual learning because there is not a qualified teacher available. There's an increase in the number of standards being taught. Since 1991, when standards and school improvement plans started being discussed, the number of standards the student has had to learn has increased. Instead of quality, we are teaching quantity. We need to lessen the number of standards so that we teach can be taught effectively and be assessed in a reasonable manner. I have students from 7th grade to age 22. I teach English language arts, mathematics, science, social studies, transition, and daily living skills. My students go out one of 4 blocks to be with peers. There are numerous standards that they have to learn. My students are assessed on grade level equivalent standards on an alternate assessment. This alternate instructional content matches the general education curriculum but varies in depth, breadth, and complexity of learning outcomes. In other words, the content is the same, but the performance expectations are less. I have given a non-verbal severely disabled student an alternate assessment in English 1 and Algebra 1. It in no way provided any beneficial data on what he truly understands or his strengths and weaknesses, but he is required to be assessed. An overall sense of not being allowed to do the job I am trained to do contributes to my frustration as a teacher. We need to be allowed to teach. We need to be allowed to know when a student is not ready for the content being presented and given the flexibility to reteach core concepts to prepare that student. We need to be allowed to take care of the whole child and let that student know it is about the continuing improvement he or she makes and not how they do on a single test. I close with an open invitation to each of you. If you truly want to see what teachers are facing now and how past legislation is affecting our students, spend the day with one of us. Don't just pop in for a visit, but spend the entire day with a single educator to see what we are facing and the impact we have on our students. Spend time with that 3rd grade reading teacher. Spend time with the high school teacher that is trying to explain the relevance of higher math, or a chemistry teacher trying to teach how to balance a formula to a student who plans on working at GM or entering a work apprenticeship. Spend time with a special education teacher trying to provide a vast number of services in a limited amount of time. Is it worth it? For each educator, the difference we make with every child we interact with makes it more than worth it. Thank you for your time and attention.
We actually have a bulleted point. Can I get these 2 ladies just to go over their bullets so that at least they will have an opportunity
Go
to
ahead.
speak, but it does shorten it.
At 4:30, I got to hit the gavel.
Yes, sir.
My name's Rebecca McKay. I am born and raised in Marshall County. Both my parents have been educators in Marshall County for over 40 years. My uncle is a principal in Marshall County for over 20 years. I know what education is. I'm the school counselor now. I taught 1st grade for 6 years. I taught middle school, 7th and 8th grade language arts, honors English as well for 4 years when I started my teaching career. Now that I'm in the school setting as the elementary school counselor, I can tell that this system is not working. I see every day teachers and students coming to me with the pressures that are on their life. Imagine going to the test the day that you were taking your 10 ready test. Now I want you to sit down and pretend you're there. No breakfast, a domestic violence incident in your home the night before, the fear of returning home to experience punishment for not doing the dishes the night before. This is real for our students every day, and we still put irrational expectations on our students with environmental barriers that are out of their control. A single test should not be the end-all, be-all for our student. We as educators and lawmakers have to get back to basics. We are doing students a disservice. An 8-year-old who met the benchmarks all year long using state programs, has solid grades all year, and no control over his environment should not be judged on this test. You also don't have to look in the eyes of a student and a parent who have worked all year long, worked on their classroom grades, and say, no matter how hard you work today, one test determined and you have to stay in your 3rd grade classroom.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting us talk today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak. I'm Vicki Carlton. I have taught business technology at Cornersville School in Marshall County for 32 years. Our small rural school graduates about 85 students a year, and our college-bound students have the skills to be successful in college, as is evident in our many successful alumni. However, less than than 53% of our Tennessee graduates enroll in college. 6 years after graduation, less than 60% of those have a bachelor's degree and less than 40% have completed an associate's degree. On the contrary, TCAP programs have about 80 to 85% completion rate. We often hear how many of our students are enrolled in college, but completing the degree equates to advanced placement, more opportunities, and higher earnings. We are spot on in preparing our college-bound students for their coursework. But about half of our students feel like they are a square peg forced in the same round hole as their college-bound classmates. Years ago, Tennessee did have 2 graduation paths, tech prep and college bound. Some states refer to tech prep as employment prep or workplace ready. The 53% going to university do need those college prep courses, but the other 47% would be better prepared for their technical career or entry-level positions. I want to end by thanking you again for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of our students. As you can see, we are quite passionate about our students and the challenges they are facing. While we came today to voice concerns about areas we feel need to be addressed, we want you to know that we absolutely do have one of the most rewarding careers. And we are thankful for the blessings of working with Tennessee children. Words cannot express the gratitude we have when one of our students beats the odds of a challenging situation, whether it be academic or otherwise. We've heard many times it takes a village to raise a child. Those of us on the front lines are directly impacted by their celebrations of achievement and also their frustrations, but it takes all of us, and we do appreciate your commitment to our Tennessee students. Today has been a great beginning, but we would love to see a continual joint effort between educators and legislators working together for the Tennessee students. An education task force made up of educators who understand the challenges students are currently facing would bridge the gap and offer concrete suggestions as we move forward in a team-based approach to a positive learning environment that results in academic achievements from healthy, well-balanced classroom expectations. Thank you so very much for your time.
Ladies, I appreciate you coming in to testify. I'm sorry we don't have any time because the clerk's going to come in here and throw us out. But if you could, make sure Representative Warner gets all your contact information, and he'll forward that over to my assistant, and we'll distribute that to all the members here in case you have any questions. And hopefully we can continue these conversations with more teachers across Tennessee. Anybody who was supposed to speak today that we did not get to, we will roll you to the next calendar. We'll make sure you get to speak next week as we don't have any bills on notice. At this motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry.
We're adjourned.
May I pass